So you ready to hear what everyone said? So this essentially is your definition. This is essentially your definition of self-love. And it projects like this. So on my screen, I'm seeing a word cloud. So all your responses are here. So if you look at the screen, you'll notice that that loving me is the biggest response, which means that most of you define self-love as loving me. But you also had some other definitions. Some of you said it's about respecting yourself, taking care of yourself, love, selfish, putting me first. I like this one. Somebody says self-care. Somebody says loving and accepting ones. Go to a spa or retreat. Love myself. Loving self. Taking care of oneself. Care. High self-worth. And then putting me first. Somebody says it's an epiphany. Who said it's an epiphany? That's interesting. I didn't expect that response. Somebody says it's an epiphany. So we want to get into that, right? Like, why is this defined as an epiphany? And somebody says ego. Who said ego? Who wants to reveal the epiphany and the ego? All right, those are the two responses I didn't expect. So when we think about self-love, then here in this particular group, remember this is just group-centric. It's Brooklyn Faith group-centric right now. That when you think about self-love, you primarily think it's about loving yourself. But why epiphany? Why epiphany? Why would you define, why does epiphany come to your mind when you hear self-love? I need a mic. I guess I need a roofing mic. Yeah, I need a... Repeat, sorry?
I said because I just think it's all about me and I should put myself first.
So that's an epiphany.
A realization.
Oh, there's just something that just came to you. I came to you last week. Everybody heard?
Yes.
So it's an epiphany that I should put myself first.
Yes.
Ego.
Ego, that you overlove yourself. You love yourself so much that nobody else around you matters.
Really?
Is that possible?
Mm-hmm. For some, yes.
It's possible to overlove yourself. I thought self-love was a good thing. So self-love has a deep and dark side?
Everybody say church. Oh, we have to love each other. But now we have to love me first.
But is it possible to love yourself so that it gets to a point that your ego? Yep. There are two spectrums. Good stuff? Yeah. So you have to ruminate on these things yourself. You know, in my class, I don't tell people things. We share things and then we discuss and think about these ideas. So we're saying then that when it comes to self-love, there's a cutoff point. That there has to be that there's a spectrum, that there's one side and then there's the other side. So it's okay to love myself, but I must be careful that I don't overlove myself. Which now begs the question, is it possible to overlove yourself? And what does overloving yourself look like? Narcissism, selfishness. See, and somebody did put selfish. So selfish and the ego are hand in hand. Which type of love can't be real?
If it can reach to that place to overlove that I'm so locked in, something wrong with me. Ego. That person's sick. Listen.
But it still exists. And right? And that's the key. Right? So there might be somebody here today over loving themselves. According to the sister back there, I didn't say it, right? There might be a sister here today or a gentleman here today just over loving themselves, and they didn't even realize they were over loving themselves. Right? And so because it exists, then it means then that it is something that we ought to be able to be not just aware of, but it's also something we are able to address. I see somebody saying selfies are over loving yourself. Is that what I'm seeing here? Selfies are over loving ourselves? All in church? Thank you.
Because there are individuals who are so involved in themselves that every get-go, every step of the way, it's all about them. And I am happy that you did mention selfies, because we have gotten to a point in our society where individuals are so absorbed with taking pictures of themselves 24/7, no matter where they go. And my question is always, don't you know what you look like?
Well, the individual might say, I just want to share my life experiences with you. So you're defining that as overloving yourself, right? And maybe the younger generation, because this is the world they live in, might have a totally different take on it. They're just like, in any I take that back for real, in any generation. You're just, what did you say? For further what? I'm just capturing the moment for the future. Is that okay? And for my grandkids and so on, right? So you see what could happen here, right? That it is a real thing. However, even if a person is self-loving themselves, they may not be aware, and they might have a justification for whatever they are doing. So that's why when you see people do things, you can't get all upset. My sister always says people have a reason for doing every single thing they do. And you just may not understand what that reason is. Over here, I saw... Sorry? Yes, let's hear a man's point of view. Let's
Yes. Okay, yes, I'll talk fairly because I have a wife listening. But I always encourage people to always do something to appreciate yourself. Always do something to build up yourself, because there's always room for that. But economics, I learned one thing, is that while you are building up, there is a cutoff point called equilibrium. Once you get to that part, you should recognize it and stop there. Because any further you go above it, it's going to give you what is called a negative return. And that is going to destroy somebody else instead of adding to your self-worth.
Male perspective. Oh, oh, thank you. Oh, you left me?
Okay, so Sister Avril made a point about, some people get so absorbed in themselves. Yes, that's true, but some people take a lot of pictures, and you would want to think that, because they're really absorbed in themselves. But sometimes people like to capture moments. For some people, it's just like, okay, I have my family. It's like they're always showcasing their family. But for them, my kids are growing up. I want to just capture every phase of their growth. Stuff like that. By the way, the Bible says too that you should love your neighbor as yourself.
But we're just on the ego and the... Let's hear from another male perspective, because we haven't even addressed negative returns.
I saw Dr. Phil yesterday.
Oh, 1 second. Let's go to the.
If love is pure and love comes from God, how could you overlove oneself?
And the philosopher is in.
Because to me, love comes from God. Anything else other than what God's love, it's not of God.
So you're saying that when we speak of overlove, it's a thing, but it's not of God.
True.
And you're saying that this creates these negative outcomes. What does negative outcomes look like if we overlove?
Whatever percentage we go above, beyond, or as I say, our equilibrium or our maximum utility, then that is the point where that is going to spill over into somebody else's territory. And eventually that person is going to be negatively affected by that.
Good stuff. I used to want to be an economist, so this is, I took an economics class. You heard that claiming? Let's go to the sister over there.
I was wondering how you would categorize these women I saw on Dr. Phil's show yesterday, where they loved themselves so much that they wanted to marry themselves. As a matter of fact, there was a marriage on the stage where they loved themselves. But they still have an opening that if they meet somebody in the future, they would get married. I just couldn't understand it. Maybe we might be able to shed some light on that for me.
That is not of God.
Is that a negative return? Or is it that individual saying to themselves that rather than waiting for another to come along to validate, that they are validating themselves? Exactly. So can that marriage be a form of self-validation? I don't have anybody to marry me yet, but in the meantime, I can still think that I still believe that I am valuable and valuable enough to marry myself. Now that, I didn't say I agree with it, Again, I am just here to think through what people might be thinking or what I may have heard other people say in response to that. Does that make sense? All right. So I don't think I'm going to finish my presentation today, Sister Harry. So just so you know, wherever we cut off, I'm going to cut off there. Is that okay so far? One more comment before we go to the next slide. Self-love.
No, well, the point that you were making a while ago, if one has a good self-image, and that image comes from no other than God. Based upon what you said this morning, we have, when man sinned, but now man has been clothed with the right clothing, not what he made up, but with the right clothing of God. Then that individual must exhibit that which he draws from his maker.
Agreed. And I think the discussion, though, is that what does that look like for an individual? And how do different individuals categorize their own personal behaviors in terms of loving themselves? Right? And so some of us, as you said, you might have the selfie issue, but it might be validated by that other person. They might actually have a reason for it. Or somebody might say, I love me so much that I'm going to marry myself. If no man wants to marry me, in the meantime, I'm going to marry myself.
Just last note. Desiretta said, if you compare yourself with others, you become vain and bitter. For there is always somebody greater or lesser than yourself.
Very true.
So therefore, I cannot compare myself with you. You have your own identity. I have my own identity, and the moment I begin to compare myself with you, I see you greater or I see myself less than. And therefore, if I draw from one source, and that source is the creator, then I'm satisfied with me.
But we're taking the discussion, right? Because that's the general overview that we're thinking about, right? But we're taking from the discussion from that abstract view to the concrete view. What that identity looks like on a daily basis as that person expresses it. And that's where the conflict comes in, right? That we don't disagree with the theological and the foundational statement, but what we will question is when it shows up. Can we recognize it when it shows up? Is it healthy or unhealthy? Are we together still? So here's the definition of self-love. Well, you can't see it. So the definition of self-love, and this is just, this is a combination definition, so we're matching it now to your definition. Self-love is defined as the act and process of self-responsibility and self-compassion, which includes self-care, self-respect, self-knowledge, self-awareness, and this is integral to human well-being, growth, and development. And so your definitions of it are folded into this idea here. Except the things that stand out is this idea that there can be a selfish or egotistic component to self-love. So let's look at this now, because that's touching on what the economist said, right? Self-love versus self-hatred. So let's look at this one. So I want you to vote on this one now. What is self-hatred? And what reasons may cause individuals to not love themselves? What is self-hatred? So we define self-love. Any idea what self-hatred is? And let's vote on it first. What reasons may cause individuals to not love themselves? So you go back to menti.com. And there's a new code. The code is 1874-7263. 1874-7263. The code again is 1874-7263. Did we get in? I see one vote so far. Why is it not showing up here? Did it get in? It's freezing. So we have 8 responses here. Let me see. You have in the code? Put in the code. 1874. 1874-7263. And you submit. Did it go through? Yes, sir. Is everybody seeing this on their screen? A graph on their screen? That's weird. And you can put in short answers here for this one. It's not. All right, put in your, try it again and let's see. Oh, jeez. So what reasons may cause individuals to not love themselves? So we have the corollary, self-love versus self-hatred. So the votes so far are what people think about you may cause you to hate yourself. We agree? Or to not love themselves. If they are constantly told they are unworthy or worthless, having several failures in life, being criticized as kids, trauma or absent parent, abuse and trauma, abuse from family members or others, past occurrence in their life or childhood. What do we think of those responses? Do they kind of cover the concept of self-hatred when we think about it? So then how would we define self-hatred? Sorry? So it's manifested by being self-critical.
Take off my eyelashes, put on new ones, take off my...
So I have a question. How many of you, when you looked in the mirror this morning, were like, wow, I am beautiful, I am beautiful? And how many of you this morning looked at yourself and said, I think I need to fix something over here?
If I turn in this way, I need this way, come in this way, I need this one.
Right? So we all look in the mirror and we're all critical of each other. Fair enough? We all have days when we're like, yesterday was a better day for me. Or sometimes if you're taking that selfie, you might say, let me make sure I get my good side. Right? So we're all involved on a daily basis probably on being self-critical. So self-analytical. So when does that self-critical behavior lead to self-hatred?
You just don't like yourself. Some people just don't like themselves. They do all kind of bad things to themselves.
How do you know when you don't like yourself?
Do you accept yourself as you are?
We focus more on the negative parts. We focus more on what people think are negative, the negative things that people talk about us, or what we think of ourselves, than to, think of the positive stuff. We're all about negativity, whether it comes from other people or ourselves.
But
go ahead, sister.
Well, I believe in God's word. And it says, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. The psalmist declares, marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. So I am beautiful. I'm God's creation.
But self-hatred exists. Right? Self-hatred exists. What does it look like?
I think a big sign is when somebody gives you a compliment and you can't take it. There are some people you say to them, oh, you look so nice. No, me, not me. They cannot take.
Isn't that humility?
That's not humility. There are some people that cannot take a compliment. No matter how nice it is, they can't take it. And they think that the person saying it is not being genuine. To me, if you cannot take a compliment when somebody say you look nice, you're suffering from self-hate. That's not humility.
So self-hatred can be insidious. Let's go to I know she had her hand up for quite some time.
No, the question you asked was about self-hatred.
Yeah, and what does it?
Self-hatred is directed to oneself and not to others. So the things that one would do to themselves detrimental to their health, to their well-being, it's not directed because it's directed to themselves and not outwards to others. So the cause, we all mentioned some of the things that would have caused it, but it's a combination of everything that we said. And sometimes the experience that they experience, they think that there isn't a God or anything that can change it or make it different, which sometimes that's why some people end up committing suicide, because they don't think that there is any hope or any way out. So everything that they do, like cutting themselves, pulling out their hair, become bulimic, stop eating because somebody mentioned that they're too fat, so now they stop eating, starving themselves. Somebody mentioned something negative to them, and they use these negativity to inject into themselves.
And they can't even take a compliment. Right? So here's the thing. Oh, you wanted to say?
No, that's okay. No, I was saying that self-hatred is also that you surround yourself with darkness and you feel like you don't exist, or why do you exist when there's nothing around you that will make you happy? You are just in a world of darkness all by yourself.
So the comments spark other questions in my mind. So this is going all kinds of directions now. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so it's a process. The self-hate might begin with you just seeing yourself in the mirror and don't like what you see. And then somebody else affirm it from the outside and say something negative. So it builds and it builds. So as the lady across there said, it moved from one point to the next. And eventually it could be like total self-hate that takes people down the road to like suicide and all the like. So it could start small, one negative, and then you reinforce, yeah, you know, somebody else had said that about me. And gradually it builds and builds and builds. So it's a process.
True.
Just my definition of self-hatred, I think self-hatred is to see yourself as undeserving of what's good and positive. So many times we talk as if we have self-confidence and we love ourselves, but we settle, and you can see it in us that we settle for less than we should because we do not see ourselves as deserving.
Is this stuff we agree with?
Yes. And to add to that, is that when you feel not belong, you don't have that sense of belonging. Everyone tells you you're something negative. And so you said, I mean, what am I existing for? I'm nothing. So it has to do with people hate themselves because of what's going on around them.
And that is, right, and that is the, when we think about this now theologically, right, that is the work of the church. Understanding that there are individuals who exist who feel this way. And when they come into our presence, we are trying to get them to that point, to see that they are loved by God and that He can bring them back, because that's the mindsets we are trying to change. But we have to start from where the individual is. Does that make sense? We cannot discard what the individual is feeling, what they're thinking or feeling. We need to be able to hear it, and then from that place, then we can build a plan on how we can rework that mind. And rewire, yes. We want to be able to rewire that mind so that that individual can begin to feel whole again. Yeah. And this is why we have to be so careful about the words we use when we step into the sanctuary. The look on our faces when we step into the sanctuary. Because an individual could have come in this morning and they could have been on the brink. But a smile could have changed that. Or they could have been able to leave and say, that place, Brooklyn Faith, those women there look like they're very happy. They look like they're having a good time all the time, right? The music is on and popping. You see what I'm saying? We acknowledge that it exists and we make plans.
Yeah, another sign of self-hatred is when you're not able to move away from negativity. Like you see it, recognize that this is not for you, and walk. Because there are some people who like to sit in a situation. You're trying to get people to like you. If they don't like you, move. Don't sit there and keep trying to get their affirmation. If they don't like you, go somewhere else. But there are some people who they torture themselves trying to get some people to like them. No. If they don't like you, move ahead. And to me, that's a sign of self-hatred where you cannot detect when you are no longer liked and it's time to hit the road and find another group where you can feel appreciated.
Can I put a caveat to that?
Not necessarily an abusive spouse. Suppose it's a brother yearning for another sibling's attention and so forth. How do you just walk away?
Again, it has to do with socialization, in my opinion, right? You're correct. You can't choose your family. You can't. But I'm when I talk like this, I'm more thinking of like young people at school in situations where they have certain, like they want to be somebody's friend. And they do anything to be their friend. That's more situations I'm thinking of, right? Because you're right. You can be you get yourself, well, if you're going to get yourself, well, a family, if you marry somebody who hates you, well, mercy. That again show that was self-hate for you to get yourself in that position. But anyway, but to me, in situations like in school and even in church too, where you are moving around a group of people and you recognize that they don't like you, form your own group.
Right, and that comes. Go ahead, Sister Harry.
Okay, and like Sister Camille was saying, like the lady brought up, what if it's a sibling? Walk away in your mind. You could be living in the same house, but if that person, you don't have a place to go, and if that person doesn't want you around, walk away in your mind. I'm living with you, but I don't have to put up with what you're doing. Walk away in your mind.
So those are one more comment on this.
Actually, I have a question. So
go ahead.
Okay, is it possible to be demonstrating behaviors of self-love when you're, in fact, hating on yourself?
I'm hearing yes, but I didn't see a hand to answer the yes. I told you this class, this is an interactive class. I only summarize.
No, I was talking about self-hate. Self-hate begins with when you grow up and the things that you keep hearing time after time. And a child continues to suck in that kind of criticism. If it's good criticism, most times it moves out and the bad criticism stays within your mind. And so you grow up in your subconscious, I'm nobody. Nobody will ever love me. I'm so ugly. And look at my shape, I'm so fat. And these things stay within your subconscious. And you start to hate yourself as a child. And you grow up into teenager. And you certainly hate yourself too. And this is why some young people do all manner of silly things. Because they think they are trying for somebody else to love them. Because they are accustomed hearing all these bad critical remarks about themselves. They go looking all around places to find love. And you wonder, why this nice girl so well educated? Why she put herself with this kind of boy, this little no good boy? Only to know that boy told her, look at you, so beautiful, and when you smile, you look like, you know how guys are. And so this is what happens. Children grow into self-hate or self-love from the family they are born into. That is a very great mentor to mentor whether you love yourself or to hate yourself. That's just my view. Thank you.
So the family can be one arena, right?
Yes, very much so.
One arena, right? There are other arenas in which we can learn to hate ourselves as well.
Yes, sometimes jealousy within siblings too. Because you're nicer than your sister or you're more intelligent than your sister, they just hate on you. For no reason. That's it.
So wherever, it seems to me, then can we say then that wherever humans congregate, whether it's in the home, in the church, in the school, on the playground, because kids say some stuff on the playground that you tend not to forget. I'm going to get...
I would say yes. Somebody can say they love themselves and they don't. Reason being, sometimes, say for instance, you go to the doctor. You have an health condition. The doctor tells you stay away from this. You keep taking it over and over. You know the result. If you truly love yourself, you will never do anything to harm yourself. And what you're doing is going to harm you. So there's no way you can say you're going around saying, oh, I love myself. You don't love yourself. Because if you did love yourself, you do what's right for yourself.
So it's manifested in behavior.
Miss.
But I think it's important to recognize, though, right, that there is an enlightened view, the view of if nobody likes me, and I should just be able to get over it, right? Recognize it. Remember, that's the enlightened view. That's where we want to get, which means that there's a process for us to get there, right? For us to realize that, okay, this group of people don't want to hang with me, but it's very difficult when you are in your adolescence, which means that you're in a transitionary period and you have zero friends. It's really hard because at that point between adolescence and emerging adulthood, most of our young people are getting their advice from their peers. At that point, their peers have almost more influence than you in the home. So you could say that sometimes till the cows are blue or whatever color they used to say. You could say that all the time. But because there's a deep need at that time for me to feel that I'm a part of my own crew, they're going to keep searching.
Yeah.
And they're going to keep searching.
Miss, can I ask?
Right? And that's why, go ahead.
Yes, can I ask a question though? Because I'm getting a feeling because when you talk about self-hate, that it is always external and the influence of people out there. But I'm wondering if sometimes it's not all about, or a great part of it is not about our own life choices. Maybe the people around us love us and they are seeing the red signs, but we are not seeing it. And the things that we choose in life are the things that are destroying us. We know we don't like ourselves, and we could do something about it.
What causes us to make those choices?
So the question here then is, as I'm hearing it though, is self-hatred always coming from something external, or is it possible then for somebody to just hate themselves? Like to just grow up, nobody has said anything, and you just hate yourself or hate something about yourself.
Yes.
Is there always an external stimuli, or can it be internal? That's the question on the floor.
I believe the answer is yes to that.
So, go ahead, young. What's your name? Sorry?
My name is Andrew.
Andrew, go ahead, Andrew.
I'd like to say that I disagree with the prospect that somebody can just hate themselves with no external stimuli. I believe that because it's like that way. I would have been started from your ability to realize. Me personally, I was able to realize, for example, like I knew, like that point in your life where you can start remembering stuff, or you realize that you're alive, like when you're like 4 years old. I don't know how else to put it, but like when you realize you're alive. If no one says anything to you, how do you just start developing those feelings? What's the process? What's the process for developing those feelings?
That's very interesting what Andrew said, because he raises a very important point I think we should focus on, is that we're continuously receiving signals from the culture around us.
Yes.
Nobody has to tell people, nobody necessarily has to say something to a person that's negative for the person to receive a cue that being a certain way or looking a certain way or thinking a certain way is not good. we are, we put our children before the not Kindle, what's the thing? The iPad. From their like 2-3-year-old, and we allow it to babysit them. And we think they're not receiving signals about what's beautiful, what's attractive, and how they should feel about themselves. So don't underestimate what's happening, the signals we're picking up in the culture.
So that's an external stimuli that because.
Oh, all right. Let me say, I don't know. Self-love, hating yourself. I have a cousin. I don't know if because we were lighter. To me, she hated herself and she had a bigger nose. To the point that now she's big, she cut it down so small you have to take a Q-tip to clean it out. and it's not like. I don't know. She just grew. I don't remember. Sometimes we probably trace and say something to her too. Yeah, like when we might say no, it's big no or so, and then she, yeah.
And you didn't think, and sometimes things have been said to us, and sometimes our parents, our family, our friends didn't even realize the kind of impact it would have on us, right? And so I agree that there are these external stimuli. The one that's harder for us to be able, The one that's harder for us to be able to pin down is whether it can be internal. Like somebody came of age and they came alive, and somehow for some reason they just said, I just don't like this thing or that thing about me, without it coming from somewhere. So I think it's a deep question. But I think it's very hard to be able to pinpoint exactly where that could be. Right? And when they get to that particular level of consciousness in their lives. One more talk.
Right here.
All right, go ahead and then.
Bringing it home and being very practical. I grew up, and many of us grew up in homes where your parents never said, I love you. So I grew up in a home where I never heard those words. In addition, I'm the first of 3, and I am as we would call, the illegitimate child.
Mm-hmm.
I have always grown up feeling that I was the outsider. And this was made manifest by the fact that my siblings also got more attention than I did. They were more petted, they were more pampered, and they belonged to my mom and my dad. I was the outsider, and I think I took that on to myself, and I allowed myself to always say I'm the outside child. And I grew up with this feeling, being the outside child, for all of my life. And I used it to back off everybody else. To the point where my father is my father, and he treats me like my real dad. So I know nobody else but him. And he has always been daddy to me. However, it came to a point when my mom died, and my mother is my mom. She was basically, as much as I never heard I love you from her, she was my mother, because this was the person who we shared blood together. So when she died, I felt that was it. I have nobody. And I made that into an issue for myself. It got to the point where when we were at the funeral, my father was introducing me to somebody. And I think unintentionally, he said, this is my stepdaughter. He has never said that before. Never. In all his introduction of me in his life, it is always his daughter. And that for me as a grown adult, this is a grown adult at this time, because this was 4 years ago, I internalized that. And I said to myself, it convinced me that I was an outsider. And I've always been telling people for the past 4 years, I have nobody. I am me because I have my mom and she's gone. But what has strengthened me is the fact that, as Sister Jean says, I have God. And he has convinced me over and over that, as Sister Ware has said, I am beautifully and wonderfully made in his presence. However, there is that individual who may not have that reality.
Yes.
And for that person, where do they go? Because it even materialized itself further. In 2 months ago, my family on my mom's side decided to have a family reunion because we really don't know each other. And they decided to have a family reunion, which I could not attend. And inadvertently, they created a WhatsApp group. And my siblings are on that WhatsApp group, and I'm not. And it may make you want to hate yourself because you wonder, who do I belong to? Where do I stand? That sort of thing. But the strength is in knowing God. But my question is, what about the individual who does not know God? It is important then for the church to provide that cushion for individuals of this nature. Because we come to church and we have this strong look. We make it seem that everything is fine. But inadvertently, there are so many things that are going on in your head, in your mind, in your spirit, in your body that can snap at any time. So it is important for us as individuals, as children of God, to make sure that we find a little niche somewhere in our church family to cushion us when we should fall.
Go ahead.
Okay, I have a quick comment. There are a lot of times you're perfectly fine with the way you are, but you go to school and just one girl or one boy in your class say, "Oh, your forehead is big." All these years you were quite fine, you looked in the mirror, you were okay. Or somebody tells you you're too black. All these years you were perfectly okay with your complexion. Similarly, you might live with your husband at home, or you might live with your wife at home, and you understand each other. You were not going out any special place every Thursday or every month or every Christmas or whatever, but you went on Facebook, and now you see Camille and Rory going out every Thursday. So you go home and you start getting miserable with your spouse because he's not taking you anywhere. But prior to that, you were okay. A lot of times, it's what's...
Brings up an interesting point there, because both of you mentioned technology. So now technology is now even assisting in changing your view of yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Because prior to WhatsApp, you would not have known that they went to Junior's to get cheesecake without you. You would not have known that. Right? But now it opens up another avenue. But again, we're still looking at that external.
Yeah. I'm going to personally agree. I'm going to add on to what my mom said. Me personally, I'm younger, but I want to give my opinion on this because I have friends and I see firsthand in school how social media impacts friendships and relationships. So I feel like as Gen Z, I want to give my outlook on this. Because of social media, a lot of the times we now feel like there's so much missing. And especially with this, I have two things basically. Models you see on the internet that's not real. It's not real. It can't be real. because now girls go on there and then they see those models, and now they're spending $50 extra every week trying to buy all these accessories when honestly they were quite fine before. And another thing, if the only reason why you are interested in going out with your husband is because you saw it on social media,
then we have to go back to what is self-love. So Miles Monroe said, a sign of self-hatred is needing other people's approval. When you need other people to give you value. So you and your husband should go out. Not because you saw it, somebody going out, but because you value each other enough to go out. And if you, well, that's an, I can't pick that up. You guys will have to figure out if you don't like to go out. But I would say if somebody likes to go out and the other person doesn't like to go out, I hear married people say about compromise all the time. There must be a compromise point, right? Where you're going to do the thing, not because you like to do the thing, but you do the thing because you love the person who wants to do the thing with you. All right? Next slide. I was going to do this as an activity, but I don't think I can get to move all of you in these 3 places. So the next slide is about, you must come, do you agree or disagree, or are you neutral that you must completely love yourself first before you can love another? So this is something we hear all the time, right? So I don't think we have time to move everyone. I was going to say, if you agree, come on the right. If you disagree, left, and middle is neutral. But let's just, thumbs up is a good one. Oh, that's a good one. Thank you for that. I like this class. This is a good class. So thumbs up if you agree. You must completely love yourself first before you can love another. Thumbs up if you agree, and thumbs down if you disagree. And if you have no opinion, don't raise your hand. If you're neutral. Who's the winner? How many agrees? So we have more agrees than disagrees. So I'm going to go with a disagree. I want to hear why the disagreeers are disagreeing.
Oh, my goodness. I think that it's best to, can you hear me? I think that it's better that you'll wait until somebody tells you they love you to love yourself.
You heard the chatter after your comment? They're talking about your comment. But you're holding your ground, right? You didn't hear?
Okay, listen carefully. I am saying, in my opinion, if somebody says to you that he or she loves you, that's a good reason to love yourself. Yes.
Another person who disagreed. Let's get over here. I saw a hand over here wanted to say something. No? You disagree?
I disagree because I don't think you have to completely love yourself first before you can love another person. But I think
Hold on, folks.
I think you love them the best way that you know how to, because even in relationships, we commit ourselves in marriage and stuff like that to other individuals. But sometimes you're still learning who you are. Sometimes you're still growing. You're still changing. So both things can happen together.
Are those the neutral people we're hearing from? Amen? Or are those who had the thumbs up on the yes changing their vote?
No.
Huh? Are the yes people changing the vote, or are the neutral people voting in?
Completely is completely.
You don't have to.
So, if I don't love me, I cannot love you.
But it's.
Go ahead, Andrew.
You don't. Okay, we have to acknowledge the key word here. Completely. Would I say, how many people would say that they completely love themselves? Exactly. To completely love yourself, you don't have to. You can love yourself a lot. But you, in the back of your head, you can have that one thing that you're insecure about. You can have that one thing you don't necessarily like about yourself, whether it be personality or physical body trait. However, that doesn't stop you from loving someone else. Because I once heard this, from one of my friends told me this: a friend that can help you thoroughly and adequately when they're still in crisis is one of the best types of friends you can have.
Do we agree?
Repeat the last quote you made.
A friend that can adequately help you and cares enough to help you even while they're in crisis and they're dealing with their own problems is one of the best friends that you can have. A friend, it was a friend. A friend told me that.
So you can extend love even if you are in the process of loving yourself.
But that completely turns the question around.
I know. I was thinking on whether I should delete it or keep it, and I said I was going to keep it to see how it would, right? It kind of seems like if we just say you must love yourself first before you can love another, right? But love in and of itself, we might even completely hear really things about how we want to get to love ourselves, right? To be able to love ourselves completely. But then the economist might ask me, is that even possible, right, economist? Can I completely love myself? But so economist, can I completely love myself? So when we think about this idea, right, that how many of you then, let me go into Andrew mode. How many of you love other people, but you don't feel yet that you completely love yourself? Or does everybody feel like they completely love themselves, but you love other people, right? So that's where, right, it seems like it's a little bit confusing, but it's something that we tend to do. Sometimes we might see, for example, sometimes we might see parents loving their children even though they're not even, or at least being able to show acts of love as well. So let's look at the next. So how do we practice now self-love? Let's look at practicing self-love. Self-love is an adventure, not a destination. Agree or disagree? Self-love is an adventure, not a destination. What does that mean? Do you agree? Disagree? What does that mean? That it is a process. But when you think about adventure, what comes to your mind? Discovering new things. When you go on adventures, how do you feel?
A mix.
How do you feel when you go on an adventure?
It's a mix.
You might be excited sometimes, right? So if we think about self-love as an adventure, but it's not a destination, then that tells us that it is a process, that it can evolve throughout our lifetimes. How many of you feel like you love yourself more now than you probably did 10 years ago?
good, you meet your goals, you meet what you were planning to do, and the next day, like, you can't accomplish anything. The day seems long, yet you did nothing for the whole day. So I agree that self-love is an adventure that leads to a destination, which doesn't come final right now. It's continuous. I don't know when the final stage comes.
And for some of us, that in terms of adventure, and I took this from an author who wrote that, and for some of us, it might be an adventure. We might see it in that. It might even be an exciting aspect of our self-discovery process. And for some of us, it may not be an adventure, but it might just be called a journey. Right? It may not be exciting, but it's the journey that we're traveling at that point and time in our lives. Is that okay? So, when we think about practicing self-love, then, we also want to think about it through the basis of the commandments of love. And I crossed out the self because really, in truth, it's really the commandments of love. When Mark tells us that we're supposed to love the Lord your God, you're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. So it says two things: love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. It doesn't say to love yourself exclusively, but if you have to love your neighbor as yourself, it means then that you also have to love yourself. And so sometimes sometimes the discussion is self-love a selfish thing? It shouldn't be, right? Because even from this biblical perspective, right, loving your neighbor as yourself, that includes then, if I love my neighbor, then I'm also in the process of learning how to love myself or loving myself. So God's love is three parts. And these are things we have to understand when we think about this idea of self-love versus self-hatred. That God's love is a place, but it's a presence, but it's also a person. So in terms of God's love being a place, we will say that it's a refuge and it's a tower. But we say it's a presence because it's everywhere. But it's also a person because God's love is actually himself. And so these things this is like the theoretical and yet theological foundation of this idea of love being manifested and what it looks like. So is loving yourself of ultimate concern to you? Is it important to you to be able to love yourself? And that's a question each of us has to ask ourselves. Is loving yourself of ultimate concern to you? Do you care about it? Do you even think about it? Anybody sits down during the weekend and thought about, do I love myself? I love myself, I love myself, I hate myself. Does it play in your mind sometimes that you hate yourself? So is loving yourself of ultimate concern to you? Here's why this is important, right? Because there are ways in which we self-sabotage ourselves. If we do not think about self-love as ultimate concern and what that means to us, something that we value, we can also find ways in which we can self-sabotage.
In this present day. And I'm thinking about the life of Jesus. I'm kind of just rambling through things in my head as it relates to even the gospel. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. And I'm looking for demonstrations from Jesus himself in terms of behaviors that would demonstrate self-love. Because if Jesus is our example, I'm thinking, what were some of the things Jesus did showing this whole concept of self-love?
One. Go ahead. Yes, young man in the back.
Honestly, I think self-love is somewhat subconscious in that when we specifically say that we're going to love ourselves, it to me comes off a bit selfish. Self-love is subconscious in the way that our lives, and as the scripture says, is to be done in service for others. And if we look at how nature itself is, especially trees, I don't think that trees go about saying that they love themselves, but they produce so many different things that we could use. The flowers grow beautifully in ways that we could never imagine ourselves to appear as Jesus said, Solomon wasn't arrayed like these things. But the essence of it is that these things just are. They just express themselves to the fullest of how God made them to be. And we as individuals, I think, should be to the fullest of God, what God has made us to be. Right? And in that essence, we exemplify self-love. We don't have to consciously say, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. When you reach your full potential of who God has created you to be, that in itself is the essence to me of self-love. Because you are valuing what God has placed in you and to use that now in service to others. That's why the Bible clearly says to love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor as yourself. By bringing out that full purpose of yourself in providing service to others and to God, you truly just exude that self-love. You don't have to say it to yourself over and over.
So do you also agree that, based on the discussion, that when we think about, let's take one of the examples, when we think about childhood traumas and other experiences, that and the external stimuli, can that affect a person's ability to love themselves?
Of course it can.
Which then brings me to the question, right? You mentioned before and you said self-hatred is towards oneself. But can self-hatred be manifested outwards in such a way that what this young man is talking about, that you are unable to fulfill that duty, just like the trees are producing? Can it be manifested in such a way that you are unable to produce?
I don't think I mentioned that part, but what I will say is that yes, there are factors things that happen in life that could prevent us from, yes, reaching our full potential, but it takes some thought, some consciousness of what has happened, and being willing enough to ask for help, right? And asking for help in itself is, in essence, self-love, but you don't have to say that it is self-love. Right?
And that is where we want people to get.
Yes.
Right? We're saying that it exists. Self-hatred exists. We're saying that self-love can have a negative aspect to it if it's on the other spectrum of it. But we're saying that because it is a real thing, and we do want people to be able to produce just like trees produce, that it is a process to get some people there. Yeah. And some of us have been able to handle that well. Mm-hmm. Some of us have been able to mature in that well, but some of us have not been able to do so.
Right.
Does that make sense? And when we think about Jesus, we can think about Jesus in terms that, did Jesus ever speak negatively about himself? But did other people speak negatively about Jesus? Sure did. But Jesus never spoke negatively of himself. Or did Jesus accept other people's approval of him? Did he? He didn't need. As a matter of fact, he infuriated people. They probably thought he loved himself too much, for all we know, right? Because Jesus always carried himself with such confidence. So even though there was a lot of negative stimuli around him saying, look at where he's growing up. Something good could come out of Nazareth? Are you kidding me? Isn't that Joseph's son? He's just a carpenter. How dare he come in here and tell us that he's the Son of God? So there was a lot of negative stimuli around Jesus all the time, but he always held his ground. And so I think that's the model that he wants us to have. Not to be to the point where we go to self-love, where it's just so selfish, and it becomes a point where others are looking at us, and even if we don't know it, it is not producing anything productive per se, right? But he does want us to have that confidence. Comment? Mm-hmm.
Program to create self-hate. To us as Western African, people of African origin, has been programmed to cultivate self-hate, not self-love. So therefore, we have to make a conscious effort to cultivate and exude self-love so that we can get it. No group in the Western Hemisphere has experienced that. So outside, we cannot always try to use the general concept of people because we are a different people. And you could be in self-denial about it, but you got to look at practical Western history as our presence here in this Western world and how that took place over 508 years that is still regenerating. And there's a letter called the Willie Lynch letter. Some people say it's fictitious. Some people say it's real. But the tenets of it stated that if they program us it was written supposedly in 1712, so it would last for 300 years or into perpetuity. And 300 years from 1712 is, 5 years ago is 300 years. And we're still talking about self-love right now. So therefore, that self-hate was part of that plan. And the trees, the difference about the trees is that the trees they have that innate nature to reproduce as they are, unless they're affected by environmental factors.
External. Mm-hmm.
But we as sentient beings, as thinking people, have the ability and the propensity to be influenced by external factors that influence the way we think, and since we were programmed that way, we will be negatively programmed. So we have to make a conscious effort, just like negativity, we have to make a conscious effort to be positive, but we don't have to make a conscious effort to be negative. So we have to work hard at loving ourselves so we can learn to love each other.
Yes. And you're bringing up that African experience, right? The African experience. Whether it's Afro-American, Afro-Caribbean, right? That African-American experience that, yes, we have had as a people, right? We have had to make conscious decisions in terms of based on how we were viewed, to be able to look at ourselves and to see our children as whole and capable like any other group to be able to produce. Because that's the purpose as well, right? This idea of being able to produce. So I'm going to close here in a moment. And just to remind you here that when we think about, I probably was pressing this, that when we think about self-love and the process of loving ourselves, we need to remember that we are designed to be loved. So that's important, that you are designed to be loved, but you're also designed to be blessed. And some of us don't always think that. We don't think that we are designed and deserve to be loved, and that we are designed and deserve to be blessed. But this is all scriptural. And that it is important not just to care about yourself, but you also need to care for yourself. There's a slight distinction here, that caring about yourself is really about emotionality without intentionality. But when you care for yourself, it means that you're in active engagement. You're doing something positive to positively affect your sense of well-being. It's deliberate and it's purposeful action, plus the emotions that you feel. So when we practice this self-love, when you love something, you invest in it. Self-love determines what you invest in. So as we leave here today, I want you to think about, what do you invest in? How do you invest in yourself? How do you invest so that you are loving yourself? So we're going to close here with just a few comments. How do you invest in yourself or show that you love yourself? What are some of the ways that you do that? Take a shower. Go to the spa. You get your nails done. You acknowledge yourself through the eyes of your Creator. Anybody else does anything? Eating healthy.
A way to show that you love yourself is
Repeat.
a way to show that you love yourself in one field, like personal relations. One way to show that you love yourself is to quickly stamp out any person, well, this is what I do, any person that is showing negativity, and this negativity is, I told my mom this, people that only criticize you and then they do it to pull you down instead of to help you, that is someone who's hating on you. And if you love yourself, then you'll distance yourself from the hate. Love and hate cannot exist.
Good point, right?
Together.
One of my students this summer put it this way. She said, sometimes your friendship group has to become a dot. Sometimes your friendship group has to become a dot. You have to distance yourself. It's hard. But remember that you are investing in yourself. We had a comment in the back. The gentleman wanted to say,
Yeah, when you could love them.
yeah, when you get to that point, when you can love the quote-unquote
plus
unlovable.
all what's said here.
Exactly.
When you reach to that point and you could really love this person that don't even need love, the way they behave. They reject everything. It's like you see them and them is like an outcast. When you could love that person,
Yes.
truly love them, I believe you have love for yourself.
And right, because and even with that, right, that comes up with that sense of being able to have tolerance, right, which is a developing part as you are loving yourself. Because in order to love yourself, you also have to be tolerant with yourself at times, right? Not just overly critical with yourself. So as you go throughout this week, I want you to think about, I'm on another page, that when you think about investing in yourself and loving yourself, you want to think about it in terms of how you're spending your time. Are you spending your time in ways that love yourself, meaning that you're going to be growing? Your intellect, how you're developing your intellect, your wealth, your health, both spiritual and physical, somebody said that, and also your relationships with God, yourself, and others. Because self-love itself, self-love is an act. It's deliberate and purposeful. It requires a tremendous amount of strength. It is not easy. It sounds good, but it is not always easy. But always to remember that you are in the process of becoming. And we are ending here today. Thank you.
Dr. Callwood, words are inadequate to express what you did today, from this morning on. I think that I know the church has been blessed. Have you? I was downstairs and somebody came downstairs and they said, "Did you hear this?" You could have heard a pin drop when she was presenting. I asked my husband, I says, because normally when you're downstairs, you kind of miss some of the things, which is unfortunate for me, because prayer breakfast, everybody came downstairs and said to me, man, that was good, that stuff you did with the chairs. And then today again, I had to hear it. So the next time you come in, I'll be right sitting here. I am not going to be doing anything. So, but seriously,
Is it possible for you to not be?
I'm going to be living like Mary in a Martha's world. I am going to be living like Mary in a Martha's world. So next time, and there will be a next time. So I thank you so much from the pastors, Pastor Francis and Pastor Morgan, from the elders, from the Brooklyn Faith Women's Ministry, and from Sister Jean. And from Sister Jean. We want to thank you so much for a day well spent in God's court. God bless you.
Thank you, and it was my absolute pleasure to be here with you this Sabbath day. So I trust that each of you will have a very blessed week and that you will do something this week to love yourselves. Even if that includes getting a milkshake, okay? Tonight. Don't worry always about the calories. All right?
Amen. Love yourself. Pastor Francis, I'm going to hand over to you. Because we're going to have a business meeting for those of you who knew. So I'll probably say it for him. If you're not a member, a baptized member, we